everyone. Welcome to On the Air presented by AIRWAAV. I'm your host, Sydney Smith, and I'm here with Dr. Dena Garner, who is the researcher behind AIRWAAV and really the expert behind it all. Well, thank you for coming on with me today. I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me. I apologize. I don't have a prototype for you.
Oh, that's okay. No worries. We can do without it.
Okay, sounds good.
I guess I really just want to dive in and understand more about the product and how it works. I think it'd be very helpful for everyone to hear really the how behind it. And I think hearing from you, the expert itself, I think will be great. So first, you were the one with the original research and the idea for AIRWAAV. So can you take me through that journey of how did that begin? What led you to create it? Anything like that?
Sure. So I was approached, it's been about 18 years ago with a mouthpiece by a mouthpiece company. They were interested in doing research on physiological effects of the use of the mouthpiece on performance. And so what I really set out to do is to disprove that it had any physiological effects, because honestly, there had not been much in the literature about that. And primarily, it's a protective device, mouthpiece, mouth guards. So the goal was to do a basic study with a graduate student to disprove that it had no effects. And so when we first started to see some differences, and athletes would also mention that there were improvements across the years, it really helped to encourage me to figure it out. So what was the physiology, or was it all in someone's head that the improvements were there and therefore more of a placebo effect? So it led down those roads that we have research now in, which was more, greater understanding of its effects on lactate and cortisol and why that would be happening. This is really difficult. Those are objective measures versus that subjective feelings of improvement.
What is different about the mouthpiece now as opposed to the original prototypes?
So basically, when I started to delve deep into understanding the why, I started to look at various different mouthpieces because I wanted to see, was this across the board? And when I didn't see that, and I started to observe what was different about a mouthpiece or what caused potential effects, it led down the research that's really there now with the tongue placement and also optimization of your occlusal spaces, are all your teeth touching. That really, there's some research, a lot of research with the Japanese researchers, also in sleep apnea, which showed me that there is objective data with placing the tongue. It's almost like it is a muscle, and it creates, when you mechanically and you contract it, it mechanically causes a change in your upper airway. So we were able to document that. That was primarily done with sleep apneic patients, but we were able to document that with healthy exercising patients or individuals. So all of that data, all of the testing that I did with various mouthpieces led to what we now have is the AIRWAAV, where it places your occlusal, your upper and lower teeth in optimal position, puts that mandible more forward, and then that tongue lowered, and in more of a contracted state. And so that results in the outcomes we've noted, the cortisol, the lactate, respiratory changes.
When you first created the first couple of prototypes, what did you want to improve? What did you start working to improve from the originals?
So basically, comfort, right, is important. What's different about this is it's not an upper mouthpiece, it's a lower, which is against the norm of what most people would assume would be a mouthpiece. And so my goal was to create something that was functional, but also comfortable. So how do you do that? Like, how do you initiate or cause the tongue to act? And so that was a part of the design of that, and also create comfort for your upper and lower teeth. That's what all the thought process is. Is it functional? Is it also, would an athlete use it? Would it be something I use? I mean, one of the things that I always have done with research is try it myself. So there were a lot of prototypes. I was just trying, on my Saturday runs or, swims or bikes, just to ensure that we had something that would be viable for an athlete to use.
You touched a little bit on the tongue placement, and the AIRWAAV Mouthpiece is built to fit on the bottom of your jaw. So where should your tongue go exactly, and how should it fit?
So, and it does, I've been using mine so long now, it's easy to forget that it may require someone to get used to it. It usually takes a week or two to feel that, to be comfortable with that. But you'll feel the little bar basically behind the back of your teeth, and that's where your tongue will be placed up under that bar. And the way I use it, the way I test my subjects, is I have people bite down and put their tongue under that and would breathe through your mouth during whatever exercise you're doing.
Now, if your tongue is not actively engaged and put down, do you still reap the benefits?
Yes. And so there's basically two aspects to this mouthpiece that make it unique. You've got the lower part, which causes all your teeth to be in contact with the lower teeth, in essence, or for all to be in contact. That biting down is important. The clenching is important when you look at anaerobic exercise, such as weightlifting, powerlifting, CrossFit. Because what we've seen with clenching, again, improvements in our data, but also, as I mentioned earlier, the Japanese have a plethora of research related to improvements with clenching. There's research that supports that clenching improves cerebral blood flow. And so that is what we have hypothesized causing these changes in cortisol. The other aspect to it now, the tongue placement is important more of an aerobic athlete because, again, the research with sleep apnea and related sleep apnea research shows that athletes and individuals who can contract and place that tongue in a lowered and more forward position cause that mechanical change in your respiratory and your oral pharynx. And so that opens your airway, and we've documented that with CT scans, and therefore aligns with the data that we're seeing with respiratory rate changes and lactate.
So with the clenching, the opening of the airway, are there certain sports or maybe factors that lead to this that help someone benefit more from the AIRWAAV piece than others?
I think we've not noted that in any of our literature. What I like to say is almost like you get 2 for 1 with this, because most athletes, at least the ones I know, will cross train. They do both weight training and aerobic and anaerobic. So you don't have to buy 2 different mouthpieces if you don't need to do that, and it can be beneficial for both. There are 2 different products, right, that are more comfortable for CrossFitters versus the endurance. And so therefore that's the option, but it also provides improvements. And I would say we haven't noted that there are improvements for any specific group more than the other. I mean, cortisol and lactate both significantly change for either athlete group. What I like about it, however, is we've done research to show after you finish your exercise, you wear it for about 10 to 20 minutes. That's typically what I do. And our research shows that with resistance training, that leads to improvements in cortisol over a period of time. So potentially in both sets of athletes, aerobic and anaerobic, you're affecting that recovery trajectory for the next day. So that's research that we need to do. I know we're going to talk about that later, but I think that would be a large benefit for someone who's both aerobic and anaerobic athlete.
You said that you like to wear the mouthpiece for a little bit of time after you're done working out. Is it necessary to do that in order to reduce the cortisol levels, or does that happen during your workout as well?
It happens during, and it's just for me, we need to do that research furthermore, like exactly how long we've done the time frame. We know that it lasts up to about 30 minutes, but does that significantly affect recovery parameters, muscle physiology? We've not done that. So for me, I don't think it's critical that you do it. It's not going to affect the acute exercise. Over time, that's what the data could bear out with the future research looking at, okay, is there a certain amount of time that we have benefits that would be more lasting, right? You think about exercise in general. I mean, there's always the good cool down. We have a warm up typically and a cool down. Those are always good to incorporate in any training protocol. So I would just basically say, keep it in until you finish your cool down, and then you should be fine, but again, we see acute benefits during the exercise for individuals that to take it out immediately after exercise. We're not seeing that causes any differences in outcomes yet, but we need to do further research to show that.
Okay. I want to take a step back. We know that the AIRWAAV Mouthpiece is built for performance. It enhances strength, recovery, and endurance. So I really want to touch on each of those aspects and really how it helps, which you've done so some already, but I guess just taking a deeper dive. As far as endurance goes, you've touched some on how the tongue placement helps open up the airway. Does it help someone with breathing issues such as asthma?
We have not studied that yet. We have, I have been notified by individuals over time to show their personal experiences have helped with that. That's one area, again, that we have not studied. So I can't comment on that specifically. I can just comment that we've had athletes who say they have asthma and it helps with their training protocols.
Okay. The tongue placement is really what helps open up the airway, and it can really create a drastic opening. Are there certain conditions, maybe even a tongue tie, does that affect how the mouthpiece might work?
So we typically study healthy individuals. We haven't had populations or individuals within our population who have issues with tongue. I believe over the years of me doing this research, we've had, I can count on one hand, maybe even two or three, who have issues with even trying to fit the mouthpiece because of the gag reflex. But it's very atypical for individuals to not be able to fit the mouthpiece, firstly. Secondly, related to your question about maybe the tongue, I guess, morphology, we've not had individuals within the cohorts we studied or in the populations of my colleagues who've used mouthpieces that issue come up. But again, I'm sure that would complicate things if you had that sort of issue for individual.
As far as clenching goes, do you mind explaining that and how that plays a part in strength?
So, as I mentioned before, we have not specifically looked at clenching. We did an initial kind of pilot study in the fall of last year, doing some EMG data collection on clenching. EMG data is pretty messy, but what we were able to see with just our smaller cohort and what others have noted is the force of clenching. And again, with Japanese, I would cite their articles, their research. It causes improvements in, there's a couple of things here, coactive potentiation, that causes what they believe are improvements and motor neuron firing. The consensus is, if you look at the literature with concurrent potentiation activation, is that you've got a couple of sets of neurons who are acting on your muscle to produce force, in essence. So you've got alpha motor neurons, you got neurons going to the muscle to say contract, contract. And then you have other neurons that are basically protecting the muscle and not letting it contract too forcefully. And what some of the research suggests is that when you clench down, that in some way affects that response, so that the neurons that are to be acting on the muscle to say, oh, don't contract too much, they're actually lessened. Their activity is lessened. So that does allow the muscle to be active. Again, that's not research that we've done specifically, but other researchers have done and been able to very nicely show the effect of clenching and the force of clenching on that muscle's ability to produce force. So that's how I would explain clenching and its effects. The other aspect that, again, there's some limited data on is the improvement in cerebral blood flow. So more blood flow going to your brain that therefore affects potentially recovery and the cortisol response that we've noted in our studies. We've done blood and salivary changes of cortisol with a heavy resistance training protocol.
You may have kind of explained this, but with the cortisol, how exactly does it reduce those cortisol levels?
So as I just mentioned, we believe it's related to, theoretically, because it's difficult within our lab, you can do rat models, right? They explain this. They can sacrifice the rats after they've had a stress situation. And they can see the changes in the cascade of enzymes and hormones that occur when rats, one study I'm referring to is when they had rats during a stressed event, they were biting down on a wooden stick versus not. And they were able to show changes in the cortisol. They're basically the rat's form of cortisol. And so it's really, they tied it into some changes that occur with some neurons, but we do not know exact mechanisms. We just theorize that reduction is based on improvements potentially in cerebral blood flow and that are acted on by occurring with the increase of clenching that increases blood flow and so on. But again, I don't have a good answer for that yet. Hopefully with more brain, we have better technology to understand the brain's response during exercise. That will become more clear in the next years if to do those studies.
Okay. And it may vary from person to person, but how long does it take to consistently have lower cortisol levels when using AIRWAAV?
So for us, we would do an acute response. So we would, for our studies, we would have randomly assigned when they would wear it for one protocol. The next week when they came in, they would not wear it, and so forth. And so it was an acute. They wouldn't wear it between. We didn't have subjects wear it between. And so it was an acute response. So during that time of to your point earlier, during that time of exercise, there was the cortisol response.
On a different note, some people use the AIRWAAV Mouthpiece sometimes when they sleep just because they grind their teeth, and a lot of people are grinding their teeth in general when they work out more so than others, and that's why they geared towards the endurance mouthpiece because it is a little bit thicker and better for grinding and is more popular with the strongmen and powerlifting because they do bite down so hard. With people that struggle grinding their teeth, is there a benefit that AIRWAAV can provide for those who struggle with this, I guess maybe even in their sleep?
You know, this is interesting. I didn't know that about the strongmen and resistance trained athletes wearing it at night for clenching. I clench, and so I wear mine at night, honestly. I have the recovery product, and I love how it mitigates some of that clenching that occurs during sleep. And I've had some huge issues with clenching, so much so that in my sleep, and I don't know that I'm doing it so much that I've had to have some I've lost teeth, right? I've had implants because I have basically ground on those teeth so severely.
That's
So
really
for me,
bad.
it was critical. Yes, it was awful. So it's been very important for me over the last years to wear a mouthpiece. And I've more recently with the recovery mouthpiece started using that for me personally. I've not done any studies with that, but it's interesting to hear that there's an improvement with those athletes who have that issue at night.
I too struggle with grinding, and I grind down really bad, and I've had to go and get my jaw and everything looked at, and that's part of why I like AIRWAAV, is because it has benefited me in that aspect as well as the performance aspect as well. But from there, we are launching the recovery mouthpiece, and I want to dive into that. But before that, what research have you seen that explains how sleep affects athletes?
That's a really interesting question. We, our lab isn't set up for sleep recovery, or sleep as it relates to athletes, but that is a big topic for athletes and some researchers. And when you look at the literature, I apologize. When you look at the literature, it would be noted, especially with those individuals who really treat the athlete holistically. That would be one of the key parameters, because you've got sleep that affects hormones and the cognitive ability. I mean, if we can get our athletes to sleep more consistently and the quality to be better, then their performances will be affected. So, and that's related to the physiology and cognitive aspects of performance.
Yeah, I've seen, and just from research itself, that sleep plays a major role in just helping the body recover and repair itself, as well as preventing injuries and sickness and improving cognitive processing. And when you don't get enough sleep, you can really tell a difference in really every single area possible. So there was a study published by Dr. Watson, and he found that better sleep reduces the risk of all those things and optimizes your health and potentially enhancing performance as well. Have you seen, I guess, that sleep prevents some injuries? Is that something you have seen at all in addition to the performance?
Sure. Well, it's intuitive. It makes intuitive sense. You've read the literature. Yes, we know that physiologically, muscle function, repair, all the processes that help us to recover occur during our sleep, right? So that's why sleep is important. And you look at I think it's, so well understood now about sleep and its importance. We know the neurological effects of lack of sleep, even with data from those with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Now we're beginning to see links to some sort of correlation with lack of sleep over time, and how critical it is for an individual to have proper sleep. Of course, that stress of knowing that there's some negative effects on your health, both as an athlete, as an individual, then that exacerbates oftentimes your ability to sleep. So there's Matt Walker has some great research in this area about sleep and how to optimize sleep. So I would turn anyone to his research, Matt Walker's, and it really provides some really good guidance on how to improve sleep. And obviously, one of the products I think you're going to speak to is the mouthpiece, the recovery piece. And although we haven't done research with that that specific product, I have used it, and I found the benefits of it for sleep, and of course the clenching piece and so forth.
We really see that, I guess, the problem that athletes are having, and just people in general, is that they're not recovering in their sleep, which is why we came out with the recovery mouthpiece. And you're talking about maybe there's not direct research so far behind it, but it can help play a role in your recovery, in people's sleep. So how does the AIRWAAV recovery mouthpiece help improve the body's ability to recover?
So we have done studies with a product very similar to this within this company's line, and we have shown improvements with snoring and sleep apneic metrics. So it is a product taken from that, which is the recovery. We've modified it and made it more accessible and usable and functional for the athlete. So based on the research we have done, right, we have good understanding of its improvements on aspects that are related to sleep quality, is how I would say it. So the sleep quality was improved with the lower device versus without one, or even upper lower device. So the sleep recovery really maximizes the benefits of what we've seen with prior research. Again, quality, snoring, for example, being able to rest more fully without the disruption of, breathing abnormalities always leads to improvements in the sleep outcomes. It will be interesting to see what the exact physiological data will show us with athletes who use this. But again, its premise is based on the research that we've done. But improvements with this specific population and how really fine tuning the improvements and really showing what those improvements are, really get more granular with that. That's going to be exciting to see.
Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if your airway is slightly more closed, that affects the quality of your sleep, correct?
Correct. So again, going back to the sleep apneic research, with research that included both healthy and sleep apneic patients, they were able to show that forward placement of your mandible, your lower jaw, and that tongue placement, which is what this device does, causes your airway to be open, and then therefore then affects breathing patterns, which affect breathing quality and outcomes throughout one's sleep.
What is different about the design of the recovery than the regular AIRWAAV mouthpieces? It has similar effects, but obviously this is more geared towards the tongue placement to open up your airway during sleep. But what is new about the recovery mouthpiece?
So what's different about this one is when you're when you're awake and healthy and running, you can think about placing your tongue down and forward. So there's just a bar there. When you're asleep, you can't think about tongue placement. So what's embedded in this design are little nodules, little bumps towards the front. And whenever you have something in your mouth, if you just put something in your mouth, like a mouthpiece in general, and you have some sort of abnormal kind of bump design, your tongue's going to naturally go to that. So what it does is it prompts the tongue forward with those little nodules so that it would help place that tongue where it needs to be, and you don't have to think about it when you're sleeping.
So really with the recovery mouthpiece, we see the optimization of the airway so that we're able to breathe better. We're able to get better quality sleep. And two, if you grind at night, wearing the mouthpiece is going to help with that as well. Do you think there is enough difference when using it?
We don't have the data with with and without with this specific device, but again, based on the prior research, there was significant difference with a lower oral appliance and the parameters that were studied related to sleep quality and comfort. So then, as an individual who grinds again, just going back to that one aspect, right, is, okay, how much does a tooth implant cost? For me, it was worth wearing something. And also, if you sleep with someone, they are often, they'll wake up with someone who's grinding. Yes. So their sleep quality is better. And if you look at the data, that suggests someone who can improve not only their sleep for them personally, but also for the individual they're with. So there's two people who would be affected by that.
That's always a benefit to not only help yourself, but your significant other and whoever's around you, so you're not waking everyone up.
That's correct.
So lastly, from a research perspective, what is on the horizon for you? What things are you working on researching now?
So it's there's so many things you want to do with the research, and primarily because there's not a lot of people doing this research. So it's an open field, really. I really want to start connecting the dots with the brain physiology, brain outcomes, and with the use of the mouthpiece. And as like I mentioned earlier, the technology is becoming more refined and more easy to utilize in an exercise setting. So that would be something I really want to explore. Cerebral brain flow is really critical. Obviously, continue to look at recovery data itself, like how does we know the acute response, but what is the over time response of wearing the mouthpiece for an individual? The last thing I really want to mention is the cognitive aspect of wearing it, because if there are improvements in cerebral blood flow, how does that therefore affect neurodegeneration over time, cognitive ability? I've had some initial research. So one of the things I look at is the blink reflex. And so that neural pathway is pretty, it goes throughout your brain, that blink reflex response. And so when we've done some pilot data with exercising with and without a mouthpiece, that blink reflex response improves. And so what is happening over time with these outcomes physiologically in the brain? Of course, acutely is important. We continue to study that and support the evidence that we have. But that would be some of the things that I really like to focus on.
That's very cool. I'm excited to hear any of the findings that you find out and see how that can play over into AIRWAAV and see if we can come out with any further, products or even improvements to what we have now. So I'm excited. Thank you for sharing.
Yes. Thank you.
That's all I have for us today. Thank you for sharing all of your research and expertise with me. I enjoyed hearing all of it. So thank you very much, Dr. Garner.
All right. Thanks, Sydney. It was good to be with you today.
Yes. I'll see you later. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That's it for today's episode of On the Air. Thank you all for listening, and thank you, Dr. Garner, for joining me. Be sure to stay tuned for our next episode, and don't forget to purchase your own AIRWAAV mouthpiece if you want to break your best and unlock your full athletic potential. Drop any questions that you have about AIRWAAV in the comments, and see you next time.